Good evening. Welcome to the December 8th, 2025 Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting of the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. I call the meeting to order. We'll start with general business, the verification of meeting posting. Julie, can you please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda would be the opportunity for citizens to speak. Julie, do we have anyone signed up for this evening? We do not. All right. Then with that, we can move on to our first action item, which is the minutes approval for the November 10th, 2025 Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as presented for November 10th.
Moved by Mrs. Voigt,
Second?
seconded by Mrs. Gren. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. All right. That leads us into Section D, which is our policy discussion and information items. And we have 5 technical corrections tonight. So Dr. Siebert, I'll just turn this over to you and you can walk those to us.
All right, thank you, Mr. Watt, and good evening, everyone. The first one is Policy 0141. It is a technical correction to the number of board members, which, of course, in Waukesha we have 9, and it is referencing Statute 120.41, which is the statute that describes unified school districts, of which we are one. So that is that technical correction. The second one is Board Policy 0145, and the remainder of these policies, essentially what we're doing is we're adding in the actual titles of the policy that go along with the numbers of the policy. So as you remember, we've been doing this on a more regular basis. So just whenever there is a board policy number within a policy, and some of the policy numbers now have also been updated, or the title has been updated, it's replacing those titles. So that's in that one. In number 3, that is Policy 1213, Student Supervision and Welfare. That is the exact same thing, where we are adding the policy title. I'm going to wait for the microphone there. Policy title to the number. Number 4 is Policy 5111.01 for homeless students. That again is adding the title of the policy to the number. And then you'll notice in many cases it'll cross off of education when referring to the Board of Education. That's just because statutorily the term is school board. So board continues to remain fine, but Board of Education, while we use it interchangeably with school board, isn't actually in statute. And then number 5 is Policy 5113.02, Intra-District Safe School Transfer Options. This one is replacing, in many cases, the term the department with DPI, or Department of Public, and it's replacing DPI for department. The department was a term that used to be used, I think, much more regularly. Back in the day, people would just say the department, and everybody knew what they were meaning. But not everybody today realizes that department refers to the Department of Public Instruction. Crossing off a couple of section numbers for state statutes. There's a semicolon, there's a or added in there that are very minuscule, and then just a number of DPIs in some capitalization or punctuation. So, for the most part, that's exactly what we're doing. The other thing in that one was, and let me just find where it was. There's one on the second page under A. It says parents, and then we're striking or guardians. The reason for that, I thought I should explain that just so everybody knew. In our definitions policy, which we've done some work on recently, 0100, parent is defined as the natural or adoptive parents or the party designated by the courts as the legal guardian, custodian, or surrogate of the students. So it's reflected in the term parent, guardian is covered. So those are the technical corrections for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Siebert. Does anyone have any questions on any of those? All right, seeing none, we can move on to the next item then on our agenda. We have no items for discussion and possible action, so we will move to section F, which is our government relations discussion and information items. And Dr. Siebert, I believe you have some legislative updates for us.
Yeah, I have a couple of new ones that we've been looking at and talking about. The first one is a bill put together by our own Representative Maxey, and it talks about excluding cost funded by referenda from shared costs for the purpose of determining general school equalization aid for school districts. So, as you know, we've had significant discussion on that in our committee at F&F and at the full board, and the impact of large referendums on overall school funding, right? And more spending incentivizes more state funding, and conservative districts such as us, who will be debt-free here in just a matter of months, don't benefit from that under the way the current model works. So remember back to the budget we just passed, where the number ended up being $5.9 million of aid that we lost out on, that we had thought we would be getting, really due to significantly large referendums in the state of Wisconsin, and there have just been more and more of those. So what this bill would do, interestingly enough, is it would deduct if any amount that was levied by a school district via referendum would then be exempt from the funding formula. So it wouldn't cause that big hit to other school districts. So quite honestly, I think it's been something that we've talked about a significant amount, and if something like this could be possible, would benefit certainly districts like ours and many other in Wisconsin. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention. When we heard about it, I reached out to Representative Maxey, who we have a relationship with, told him and his staff certainly that we have talked about this a lot, that we'd be supportive of coming to a public hearing, talking about the impact that those types of situations have had on us. And then there's actually the Legislative Fiscal Bureau sheet that tries to isolate the effects of the MPS referendum specifically on school districts. And you'll see in that document, if you had a chance to look at it, that only Kenosha lost more money in the state of Wisconsin than we did. So the MPS referendum specifically had a significant impact on the school district of Waukesha as well as the Kenosha School District. And then there's also some co-sponsorship memorandums that are a memorandum sheet that is in there. So just thought I would bring it up. I thought it was interesting, and I was grateful that one of our own legislators put this forward.
Ms. White.
What is Representative Maxey's area?
Primarily has New Berlin. I think he goes into some portions of like Western Waukesha. Representative Maxey actually used to be the president of the New Berlin School Board back in, I think, the late zeros, early 2010s, and so certainly someone who's familiar with a lot of the school finance stuff and some of the conversations that we've had here.
And then,
Ms. White, yeah.
second question is, like, this looks a lot like what David's been talking about in the past. And seeing on the co-sponsorship memorandum that, Senator Bradley is in the mix of this too. I can't help but compliment your involvement and your advocacy to bring this to their attention, because it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And
I appreciate that. I think there are a lot of people around Wisconsin who have been talking about this. I know when we visited the New Berlin School District, when we were kind of researching how their 712 operation works, I spoke with the superintendent there, and I think they were also kind of working on that angle, and may be why we see Representative Maxey so involved in this. Whatever the case, obviously, I'm a huge supporter of this, and as I look at this particular list, and we've seen the other lists that have shown, not just the impact of Milwaukee, but other districts and their referendums on the total impact, I think 75% of the districts in this state lose money as a result of the referendums that exceed their revenue limits and result in them getting additional state aid that those other districts lose. And it's hard for me to imagine that there would be anyone besides representatives of those particular districts that are the winners who would oppose this. So I'm hopeful that this will get to the floor quickly and get a vote. And I certainly would hope our education governor would back it.
Yeah, I just echoing Ms. Voigt's comment, because I think it's a important one to bring up, is you look at the people who are on the co-sponsorship memo, Representative Maxey, Senator Bradley, Senator Kapniga, all people who represent portions of the school district of Waukesha. Obviously, Senator Kapniga used to represent a lot more of it before the new maps came in, but I think it just speaks volumes to how important it is to be able to build those relationships with our state legislators, especially during those summers during the off years where they have more time to come in and sit down. I mean, I know when we did some of our meetings with local reps last summer, this was an issue that came up frequently, and it's encouraging to see that our feedback is actually sitting with our legislators, and that it's turning into something that we can point to and say, yeah, this would be helpful for our district.
Mrs. White.
Yeah, we're definitely not alone. Like the first paragraph on the co-sponsorship memorandum is talking about that more than 300 school districts across the state will be forced to help pay for Milwaukee's April 2024 referendum, not by choice, but because of the state school equalization aid formula, which is obviously what needs to be addressed.
I think, and I know Dr. Siebert mentioned this already, but I'm going to reinforce it. The school district of Waukesha was the second biggest loser in the entire state of Wisconsin on this, to the tune of, and I would be curious to know if these numbers are the most recent, but I will assume that they are, to the tune of, what, $2.5 million, I think I saw, just for MPS alone.
2.1.
Yeah, so almost half of that 5.9 million that we lost was just to MPS alone. And I wish our CFO were here, because I'd ask him, how much was our levy increase this year? Our levy increase, I'm thinking, was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 to 2.5 million, was it not?
Yes, I believe you're right.
Well, thank you, MPS. Thank you, MPS. Yeah, Mr. Zenobia.
So when you look at the information that's provided, again, I know Mr. Clark's not here. What we're looking at is the reduction in aid, correct?
Correct.
So, and probably, I'm assuming a lot of the zeros are places that haven't reported or don't know. Is that truly a no change, the zeros on here, or is it, do you know if it's that they just don't have that information, that district isn't?
No, I would say if it's a zero, then they did have no change, and oftentimes those zeros can be found in high property valued areas where maybe they don't get a tremendous amount of state aid, if any, to begin with, right?
Yeah. Well, when you go through it, it really is staggering that every district listed here is really taking a reduction that had it in the past, and then you get to Milwaukee and it's 8.2% increase. I would just say, to our legislators out there, I can't imagine anybody wouldn't vote for this. The biggest problem I have, with socialism is it's always bad. And in a case like this, it is, you are demanding that local districts pay for something else that they have no control over. And in local government, even though we're required to, and we all see the benefit of a service like public education, which on many levels is wonderful, and I'm not downplaying that, but to demand that the state and all these other districts that are collecting taxes then shift that to a place where they have no control. Everyone that favors public education and is a voice for public education, regardless of the side of aisle you're on, should be screaming for something like this, because it is taking from your kid and giving it to somewhere else, where, in my estimation, it's not the school that needs it, it's that the funds are being mismanaged would be, I guess, legally speaking, probably the nicest way I could say. Whatever's going on in our districts that are wasting this much money, and then forcing the rest of the state to pay for it, it's unconscionable. And I don't know where this legislation will go, but everybody in our legislature should be on this. So it really is, once you look at these numbers in this context, it's really kind of staggering just how many districts will suffer because of poor policy and poor mismanagement, and really an ineptitude on the part of our, I would say, our governor and other people in state government that simply refuse to do what needs to be done and rectify our public schools so that the ones that want to operate well can. And that's just one of the biggest things that kind of gets me, is that all of these districts in the state that are doing what they can to service their communities and their kids suffer because of this type of mismanagement and politics on the part of our state leaders.
Yeah, and if I could just, and I've said this at other meetings, but I want to make it clear for anyone who may be listening, the reason that MPS is getting so much more money in state aid, which is a flat amount, that number has not changed from one year to the next, the amount of state aid available to all districts, is because they passed a massive referendum. And the state law says the state aid is based upon the amount of money the district spends, irregardless of what the revenue limit is. So essentially what was allowed to happen was the voters in the MPS district were able to impose a tax increase on 75% of the school districts in this state simply by raising how much more money they spend. To me, I mean, I agree with everything you said, but that's even more unconscionable, that the voters in a completely different school district can vote themselves an increase to their property taxes and then get a bonus from 75% of the other districts in the state who now have to give more to them, which is coming out of their bottom line to the tune of 2.1 million here at SDW, because they passed a referendum. We never got any vote in that. Our citizens never got a vote in it. So from my perspective, this legislation is long overdue. I'm glad to see that it made it into bill form, and I'm hopeful that we're going to hear that this is going to get a quick reading, it's going to get a quick vote, and it's going to get a quick passage.
Agreed, yeah.
The other one I just wanted to talk about a little bit tonight is the school and district consolidation bills that are coming forward. I put in a couple of articles on those for you. Some financial incentives and state assistance for consolidation feasibility studies, whole grade sharing studies. So that's where two districts get together and you decide that all the second graders, for example, are going to be in this district and all the middle schoolers are going to be in this district, for example. Some additional state funding that could be following students after the consolidation is potentially on the table. And really around a lot of the things that we're talking about very recently here in Waukesha, right? We're consolidating, we're reducing our footprint overall. Mrs. Voigt brought up an F&F, the mayor's breakfast last week, where the county executive is talking about consolidation among the communities within Waukesha County. Do we all need a fire department? Do we all need, you picked the example, right? The mayor talking about the same thing. So it's well beyond school districts in terms of people trying to be more lean, be more efficient, figure out how to make ends meet. So it's interesting. And in the case of education, it's really centered around the overall decline in enrollment. Mr. Brooks has talked about some of those numbers in some of our board meetings, that there just are fewer kids. And ultimately, it's much harder for smaller districts that don't have the number of facilities that we have, right? To have the number of options that we have to think about what can it look like here. If you are in a K-8 or a very small school district and you only have one building, right, you don't have a lot of different options. You have to run that building, but could you do it differently, right? Could you consolidate with somebody else and reduce some of the overhead that comes with running an individual school district versus sharing services between two or more? So I think it's quite interesting. I don't know, maybe Mr. Brooks does more than I do, what the odds of it being successful are, but I think it's a good thing that's being talked about and something that we can obviously relate to.
Yeah, I think, a lot of it draws on a lot of the same conversations we've been having for the last several months here, which is just the problem that pretty much all districts are facing across the state. We have 421 school districts. I didn't know this until we kind of started this process. Wisconsin used to have like 7,000 school districts back like 100 years ago. And we've shrunk down to 421, but that's still, I think Pennsylvania is significantly larger population than us and only has about 100 more school districts. So there's different ways of doing it. But, I look at some of these areas where you have multiple single school K-8 school districts that are all right on top of each other. They all have their own administration. They all have their own, principal, assistant principal, that whole staffing. And there's some of these K-8 schools where you have a separate principal for the middle school and then a separate principal for the elementary school and their own teams underneath them within the same building. So you get a lot of repetition and a lot of duplicative services where, maybe if you're 5 minutes away, it makes more sense to just share services or consolidate districts. And the purpose of these bills they're voluntary incentives and tools for districts. It's not forcing anybody to consolidate, but we've heard from school districts who've looked into this and said, yeah, we came to the table and then, the cost to get it, the cost to do the feasibility study was a barrier. So there's grants for districts that want to get a feasibility study reimbursed. Or we get to this point and we want to merge, but the mill rates are so different and one district doesn't want to have to take on another district's mill rate. So we have a equalization bill that can hold those districts harmless and hold those taxpayers harmless so that they can levy out or level out the mill rate over the course of, I think, 6 years. So a lot of different just incentives for districts that can take advantage of them if they want to. We heard and got a lot of feedback from groups like WASB and different school administrator groups. Obviously, there are some districts where this, just because of the geography, it's not as possible, right? If you're in rural Wisconsin and the next closest school district to you is 80 miles away, probably not going to be able to consolidate with them. But it's something that there's been a lot of, I think, interest on. Unfortunately, the debate on it when these were on the floor turned into just, a debate over school funding and, well, you should be spending more money on schools. And regardless of where people come down on the funding formula, Lord knows that we have our issues with various aspects of the funding formula here too. There isn't a dollar amount that's going to all of a sudden reverse decades of enrollment decline, right? When 70% of districts have lost enrollment over the last decade plus, there isn't an amount of funding that's all of a sudden going to cause people to have more kids or bring people to Wisconsin. I was New York, I think, New York State spends about 42 grand per student on in their per pupil enrollment. And their results are worse than Wisconsin's, and they're losing students at a higher rate than Wisconsin is. So sometimes it's just not something that you can continue to throw a bunch of money at if people aren't having kids, if people aren't, if your population is declining. I mean, Wisconsin's a much older state, so it's not a problem that's going to reverse itself. So if we want our districts to continue to be able to thrive, there needs to be they need to be willing to make some of these difficult decisions, and if we can help them make those decisions, if there's incentives there for them to take advantage of, I think that makes it easier. One of the biggest things we heard from district leaders when we were working on this is, the school community stuff, the importance of the local school, the sports team, and how, much that ties the community together. And I certainly understand that. I mean, we're seeing a lot of those conversations here just with at the elementary level, but I look at, eventually these districts where you're at 300 kids and it's going to continue to decline, you're going to have to make a decision sooner or later. Otherwise, that it's not going to be voluntary. It's going to just be out of necessity that these districts are going to have to merge or do something because they can't sustain the status quo.
All right, anything else legislatively?
Oh, thank you.
All right, so that takes us to other business, recommendations for future meetings. All right, seeing none, no other business is needed tonight, so the next Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting is Monday, January 12th, right here in the boardroom at the Blair Administration Building. And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.